Circular City Week 2022. Me and the entire team are absolutely overjoyed, excited about finally being back also in person for this 4th version of Circular City Week. My name is Tone Søndergaard, and I'm the founding director of Circular City Week here in New York. I'm also the director of the Danish Clean Tech Hub. Danish Clean Tech Hub is a Brooklyn-based non-profit, and we're founded by State of Green and the Confederation of Danish Industry. We have created Circular City Week with the purpose of making sure that you and us and everyone can be part of the circular movement. We're here to facilitate knowledge sharing and make sure that there is lots and lots of innovation and collaboration going on throughout the week. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have all of you with us here and out there. Circular City Week just keeps going. And we are kind of baffled every year that that's the case. We sometimes think it can't get any bigger, but it truly is getting bigger. This year we have 110 events taking place throughout this week. Some of them in person here in New York, others of them of course online, enabling all our global partners and global audiences to also be part of Circular City Week. We have 350 plus speakers that are sharing all their insights and their knowledge throughout this week. We couldn't be happier that so many experts, thought leaders are really taking part of making Circular City Week what it is. You guys here today and everyone out there, you are part of approximately 10,000 people who are taking part of Circular City Week this year, which is massive, and we could not have imagined this ever getting this big when we started it 4 years ago. And last but not least, a thank you to the 250 partners, hosts that are making this possible and who are creating all these lovely events and helping us get the word out to everyone out there. It has truly moved me, and we thank you all so much for making this a reality. Before going into the day's program, I just want you though to give a warm applause to the best and most hard-working team in world history, the Circular City Week team. You can find all of us with our small badges throughout the week, so if you ever have any questions, if you see us online, if you see us in person, talk to us. But major thank you to Imke, Astrid, Samira, Brooke, Mille, Mathilde, Mads, Louis, Pernille, and all of the others from our headquarters in Denmark who have been part of making this a reality. So thank you so much. Give them a hug when you see them. But also today, a very big thank you, of course, to our 3 pioneers, which we are here today to also celebrate and hear what they have been undergoing and undertaking for the last year. It is NYSERDA, NL, and ERA that are enabling us to create this event today, and they are also our keynotes of today. We are here essentially because they are on a mission. They're here to create and innovate circular business models in the built environment and in the energy sector. And more so, we're here to talk about how we're scaling these impacts of the circular initiatives that these 3 organizations and companies are taking on. Today's program, in very brief terms, we're going to start out with a fireside chat, which is going to be led by Casey Rowland from the El MacArthur Foundation together with Jake Berlin from NYSERDA. Afterwards, we're going to hear a few keynotes. First up will be Tom Kennedy from ERA, followed by Kate Moore from NL. And then we're going to finish off with a round of a panel session moderated by Christian Kaufholz from the World Economic Forum. So let's get this show started. Yeah, absolutely. So please help me welcome our moderator for the first fireside chat, Casey Rowland, to the stage. She is... There you go. Casey is responsible for for network development and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation here in North America, so we couldn't find a better suited person to kick us off. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tony, for that introduction. As mentioned, I work in network development at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a charity that's accelerating the transition to a circular economy by developing and promoting the idea of a circular economy, engaging key players, and mobilizing systems solutions. So, of course, it's great to be here and to be joined today by Jake Berlin, who is the Program Manager for Tech to Market at NYSERDA. Jake, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks so much, Casey. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Jake, in your role as a program manager, you're developing, scaling, and commercializing innovative solutions for tech to market in the climate space, but you're also involved as, you sit on the board for the Center for Humans and Nature. You're involved as an advisor at the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. So given your experience in this space, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your role and specifically how NYSERDA is thinking about their goals relative to the climate and sustainability.
Great, thanks, Casey. First of all, thrilled to be here on behalf of NYSERDA. We're so excited about this whole event and everything going on this week. We're just really excited to be a part of it. First a little bit more about me. I kind of come from about 15 years in the climate tech and clean energy sector, roles on the private sector and public sector side, which I think is really important because I think you'll hear this theme probably all week about collaboration and different stakeholders from different parts of the ecosystem really being necessary to drive this forward. So I know I personally draw on that every day, the different things that I've done and experienced, but I think I see it in terms of the people we partner with, the organizations we work with. In terms of kind of what drives NYSERDA in this space, I think of three things. One is, the state of New York has very ambitious climate goals, right? These were laid out in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019. There's a lot in there. I'm not going to go through all of it, but that includes an 85% reduction in emissions by 2050, an interim goal of 40% by 2030, a zero emissions electricity sector by 2040, mandates around energy efficiency, storage, solar, wind, etc., and really importantly, kind of an underlying commitment to disadvantaged communities throughout all of that. The communities and people that have been disproportionately affected economically and environmentally by the systems that have been in place for decades, right? So a commitment to really building an economy, a clean economy that works for all New Yorkers. So that's kind of like our North Star. Everything in that act and that is now being operationalized into state policy is what we work on really every day. On top of that, NYSERDA has a market transformation role. So we don't want to be a permanent solution here. We want to spur others to action, and we want to be a catalyst in this space. I actually think that's kind of ironic when we're talking about circular ideas, because we kind of have some planned obsolescence into the things that we do and our interventions. But in essence, we want to make short-term and medium-term investments that have long-term effects. And that's just really critical for the things we do.
Yeah, and that's great. You mentioned some of the collaboration and systems-based approaches that you're taking. So as you're thinking about startup programs, innovating, and even investment, you mentioned circular aspects of it, but can you talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about circularity?
Yeah, so the biggest place that circularity overlaps with what we're trying to do on climate is what we call carbon tech, right? So this is essentially taking waste carbon that would typically be an externality and essentially a pollutant and finding ways to use it for good. And so we have a number of different programs that do that. We have a program called Carbon to Value, another one called the Carbon Tech Development Initiative, something called Activate New York. And you see also one-offs throughout other parts of our portfolio and programs. It's really exciting to us because you get to address these critical waste streams from manufacturing, industry, agriculture, municipal waste streams, wastewater, you name it. There is CO2 out there that we can take advantage of and put to good use. I think about, that's a pretty broad space though. There's so much you could do in it. So Carbon to Value, one of the programs I mentioned, we're in the middle of launching our second cohort of companies that we're going to be supporting the early stage and emerging companies. And we were able to dictate what we were looking for, right? And this is where it gets very circular. So we thought about what are the outputs from industry that we care about that we want to be inputs to the companies we work with. And we said we want heavy industry. So think about mine tailings, slag, fly ash, like nasty stuff, frankly. And how do we put that to good use? And on the other end of that spectrum, right, thinking about circular, we ask for value-added products that can come out of that. So that could be chemicals, it could be fuels, it could be proteins for food production, it could be advanced building materials, all kinds of things. And so we were able to kind of shape what we're looking for there. But to us, that's the place where circular ideas are going to have the greatest GHG emissions reductions impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds like there's so much great work going on, obviously. So across all of these initiatives, and a lot of what we're talking about today is taking action and really driving impact. So I'm curious how NYSERDA thinks about measuring impact as you're taking action across these initiatives.
That's a great question. So we think about, there's some things we always track when we're dealing with kind of emerging companies, right? So we think about the number of products that have been commercialized. We try to think about the scale of that commercialization, so as measured by revenue as a proxy. We think about jobs created, right? The circular economy isn't going to be much of an economy without that part of it, right? It's critical. We also think about leverage, right? And so for us, again, market transformation, we're not going to do this alone. So we try to track what are the other grants that these companies pull? What are the equity investments that venture capital firms make in them? What are the project finance that lenders and banks bring to the table to help drive them forward? So those are all critical things. It's very hard to measure things like GHG emissions impacts in the long term for early stage companies, right? We're not going to see those effects for 3, 5, 8, 10 years, maybe never, I mean, in some cases, right? But we can try to lay the groundwork for that. So we do things like emissions reduction potential, where we try to say, if this works at scale, what will it do? Or we have something we're working on called GHG readiness levels, right? How equipped is a company to know what their impact could be, to quantify that, and to communicate that to customers, partners, investors, and all kinds of other stakeholders.
Yeah, that's great. And you've already mentioned so many great initiatives and programs that are ongoing. It'd be great if you could deep dive a little bit into maybe a few specific examples of where you really see NYSERDA is driving the biggest impact.
Sure. So there's a few. For us, it gets down to the companies, right? Because those are the ones that are like really out there making these solutions and trying to bring them to scale. So there's a few I'd mention. One is called Air Company. That's a New York-based company that is essentially recycling CO2 and using it to create high purity alcohol. That can then be used in things like spirits and sanitizers and all kinds of other commercial products. They recently raised a $30 million Series A round, which we're really excited about. That's going to be used to scale these solutions they already have, as well as move into kind of advanced fuels. So that's one great example, homegrown here in New York. There's two others I'd mentioned. One is called Senvita Factory, and another is called CERT. And I mentioned them together because they're trying to do similar things, right? They are taking waste CO2 and converting it into, among other things, ethylene. That is a major feedstock into plastics. And I have 2 young kids, so my apartment is just strewn with plastics. And every time I look around, I say, oh my God, the fossil fuels embedded in those plastics, it drives me crazy. There's got to be a better way to do this. So they're both trying to tackle that, but what's really fascinating to me is they're doing it in very different ways. So Senvita Factory uses microorganisms to create a biomanufacturing process to do that, to create the ethylene. Whereas CERT uses electrolysis. And to me, that's just like fascinating. That like there's so many different ways this could go. And from NYSERDA's perspective, we want to plant all those different seeds because first of all, we don't know what's going to work in the long term. And second, you don't know what those things are going to be, what other things they could be applied to, and what kind of other indirect benefits there could be. So those are 2 other great examples we're really proud of.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And starting to think about the future and how these initiatives will drive impact. We've gotten a little bit specific with these examples, but if we just take a step back and think about the future, are there any specific areas or movement of work that you'd like to see that you think will support NYSERDA as you move towards these goals?
So, I think ultimately, that's a great question, first of all. And secondly, I think we need people to buy these products. And I know that may sound rather simplistic, but the reality is that there tends to be a cost premium on a lot of them. Certainly for now, right? I mean, as compared to like traditional solutions that have been around for decades, they're just not far along enough in their manufacturing processes and have not reached the scale yet that on a per unit basis, these things are cost competitive. So interventions just to buy these things and help those companies refine their manufacturing processes, bring the cost down is critical. Some of these things may always have a cost premium in them though, and that just may be the reality. So we need actors to step up and say, we're going to buy them anyway, right? And that could be public sector governments doing kind of large procurements. That could be private sector companies or developers or whomever, really walking the walk, right? And there's a lot of ESG reports, oh, here's what we're going to do on climate, et cetera. Well, here's an opportunity. Buy some products that may be a little bit more expensive, demonstrate that they work, help those companies scale up. The other thing that I think as a corollary to that would be really critical is more foundational accounting, right? Because right now it's easy to say, oh, this product is cheaper. But are you really looking at what are the kind of environmental and societal impacts and downsides of that product? And if you viewed it on an even basis with these kind of carbon tech products, what would the choice be then? And so we think that kind of broad scale accounting and transparency is going to be critical to drive this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that with all the moving pieces that are at work, we're so excited to see what the future holds for NYSERDA. And I unfortunately think that's all the time that we have for questions, but it's been great to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing, and we so appreciate you joining us here today.
Thanks so much, Casey, and thanks everyone.